What happens when a king loses his crown, but not his soul? This is the story of an aging lion, once the ruler of the savanna, now forgotten by time. Abandoned by his pride and weakened by age, the lion faced his final battle not with claws, but with dignity and resilience. Two rangers ventured into danger to give a dying lion one last chance at life. What followed will warm your heart and restore your faith in compassion. At the end of Moringa Wildlife Reserve, South Africa, an old male lion was walking quietly across the dry grasslands. He was once the majestic king of a mighty pride of lions, leading the pack through many hunting seasons. Time and fierce battles had robbed him of much of his strength. The once majestic golden brown mane was now sparse, tangled and faded. His eye sockets had become sunken, giving him a tired look. His sharp teeth had almost all fallen out. Only a few were left. His ribs were clearly visible under his rough skin, some of which were starting to ulcerate each step, became heavy, staggering in the heat and withered grass. The old lion was no longer able to hunt enough to sustain his life. The younger and stronger members of the pride had ousted him, leaving him to live in solitude for many days. It had been trudging along the land it had once protected. Occasionally it would roar weakly, but no response came, thirsty and hungry. It had sought shallow pools of water where there might still be some moisture. Many times it had tried to stalk antelopes, but its teeth were no longer strong enough to bite the scars crisscrossing its body, told of the many bat battles it had won. Now they were only reminders of the cruelty of the natural law of selection. Visitors had seen its gaunt figure wandering in the distance. Someone had taken a few photos, which had reached the rangers upon hearing the news. Two South African staff members, named Logan and Dante, had discussed it thoroughly. They had determined the location of the lion's recent appearance, then prepared to set off. They had brought along medical supplies, a tranquilizer gun, and some fresh meat. Moringa Wildlife Reserve was vast, so it took them a long time to track down the lion. Both of them knew the danger of approaching a wild lion. However, the sight of the exhausted old lion made them unable to ignore it. The South African sun was scorching, and soon their shirts were soaked with sweat. Dante carefully observed each of the lion's footprints on the dry sand. Logan slowly looked around, searching for the figure of the former ruler, finally through the sparse trees. They saw the lion sitting on the ground, head down. It was gasping for breath, eyes half closed, body trembling from exhaustion. The two staff stopped a few dozen meters away from it to observe them. I raised the tranquilizer gun ready in case the lion suddenly became aggressive, but its appearance of being too exhausted to fight back made Logan hesitate. Dante put his hand on his friend's shoulder and said softly, "It's too weak. Let's try another approach without hesitation." They decided to approach slowly, avoiding causing panic. The lion squinted slightly when it saw the approaching figure, but did not move. Dante began to call softly, maintaining a gentle voice to let the animal get used to it. Logan slowly approached, holding a piece of bright red meat in his hand. The lion snorted, seeming hesitant, but the smell of the meat stimulated its survival instinct. It tried to stretch its neck, open its mouth, and bite the piece of meat with the little strength it had left. Seeing that it was willing to eat Dante, and Logan knew they had a chance to get closer while the lion was chewing. Logan gently injected it with a health-supporting drug. The drug seemed to help it stay awake a little. Hunger flared up strongly. It swallowed the meat as if it had not eaten for a month. Logan stepped back a bit, letting the animal freely eat the remaining meat. Dante stood by, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. The lion gradually showed trust, not as aggressive as its fellows usually were after eating it, raised its head, panted, and looked at the two men as if grateful. Dante gave the animal some more water so that it could quench its thirst. After about 10 minutes of getting acquainted, the two staff decided to start the plan to move it. They brought the specialized iron cage from the car, placing it a few meters away from the lion. Normally they would shoot tranquilizers to ensure safety, but this time they wanted to test its instincts. Logan slowly approached, carefully handing the meat for the lion to follow. It slowly stood up, trembling and staggering because its strength was exhausted. Each step seemed to be a terrible effort for the old animal. When it was close to the cage, it turned its head to look at Logan for a moment, as if waiting for a command. Femba gently stroked the lion's head, as if to reassure it. Suddenly, it tried to crawl into the cage, causing the two staff to breathe a sigh of relief. Dante Ahmed immediately closed the cage door, carefully checking the latch. The two looked at each other, smiling when they saw that the mission had been initially successful. The lion lay flat in the cage, panting, no longer having the strength to struggle. They quickly loaded the cage onto the truck, preparing to leave the arid grasslands. The short but careful journey towards the national park. Management facility began on the way. They drove slowly, limiting the bumps so that the lion would not be hurt. The net covering the outside of the cage was also carefully adjusted to avoid the harsh sunlight. Many tourists were curious and surprised to see the image of the car carrying an old lion. Dante quietly explained that they were saving it from dying. When approaching the facility gate, other staff had prepared the emergency care area. The lion was taken down and placed in a separate cage lined with straw, and the vets immediately examined it and determined its physical condition. They confirmed that it was severely malnourished and had many skin wounds that needed to be treated. They injected it with antibiotics, bandaged the sores, and gave it painkillers. Another vet examined its teeth and found that almost none of them were functional. Logan and Dante stood watching, feeling heartbroken at the sight. But they knew they had given the lion one last hope. The Moringa Wildlife Reserve's Wounded Animal Care Area has a separate space for the lion to rest every morning. The staff would change the bandages and check for skin infections. At noon, they fed it minced meat or soft processed food. The lion now no longer had to worry about hunting, nor was it afraid of predators chasing it. It just needs to use its last bit of strength to recover and live out the rest of its life. As the weeks passed, it began to slowly gain weight, and its fur seemed to be a little smoother, although it could not regain its former form. At least it had safety and care. Logan occasionally came to sit by the cage to observe and chat with it. Dante was responsible for monitoring its food rations, supplementing nutrition when needed. Sometimes the lion looked far away towards the horizon, as if remembering its old territory. Of course, it would never return to the herd or become king of the grasslands again. But the sadness of being abandoned was lessened by the compassion of humans during its days at the center. It gradually got used to the figures of Logan and Dante, and was no longer afraid. Occasionally, it even rubbed its head against their hands as a fragile gesture of trust. Life in the wild is harsh, but it is kindness that ignites a small miracle. And so in the last days of his life, the old lion lived in love and protection, closing his heroic journey in Moringa Wildlife Reserve. Dear friend, thank you for taking the time to follow the story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to support us.